The beginning place of generosity is working hard because you're in partnership with God. God blesses him with good ground and good grain. He blesses him with this rich harvest. But rich harvests don't just happen, right? They take hard work. You got to plow the soil, sow the seed, cultivate, harvest, partner with God. A preacher in a rural parish once visited a farmer, it reminds me, and the preacher was being a bit pious. And he said to the farmer, well, the Lord certainly has blessed you with a bountiful farm, hasn't he? The farmer was not quite so pious. He retorted to the preacher, well, I suppose so, but you should have seen that field when the Lord had it all to himself. The Lord blessed this farmer with a bumper crop, but the farmer had to cooperate with him. He worked with his brains as well as his back. The first step to generosity is to realize your work matters to God. It's to realize that your work is a partnership with God. If the place you begin with generosity is after you've gotten the harvest, then you're going to give some to God, it's going to be that much harder to be generous because you're going to feel like it's yours. But when we think biblically, we understand our work is, the word vocation, we call that our vocation, that comes from a Judeo-Christian ethic of vocation means calling. Your work is your calling, a sacred calling of God. It's not like you have your God stuff over here and your work stuff over here. I was thinking about this week. I think that's how I thought of life when I was a kid growing up. We went to church all the time, but there was a part of me like, there's my church life, there's my worship stuff on Sunday and Sunday school and all that stuff, but I sure can't wait to get out of here so I can go play. Kind of thing. There's the worship, and the play is not God's stuff. The church stuff is God's stuff, and that's the thing where that's the attitude we often have. William Hendricks once wrote, millions of people go to work every day without seeing the slightest connection between what they do all day and what they think God wants done in this world. You may sell insurance, for instance, but you may have no idea whether or not God wants insurance to be sold. Maybe you work at the FBI or the NSA, or you work with White House, or maybe you work over here in the NRO. Your work matters, but it doesn't matter because you're doing cool federal stuff. It doesn't matter because you're doing stuff that other people would really admire. It matters because you are partnering with God in his calling for your life. And if you don't have that sense, not only are you going to struggle with being generous later, but you're going to go to work every day. I've talked with people who've worked government jobs for decades. Impressive stuff, high-level stuff, and they're kind of like, I'm not quite sure that what I do really matters to God. Like the farmer in the field, if you're doing legitimate work, your work deeply matters. It is a partnership with God. But it has to be legitimate work. Of course, if you're a drug dealer, that is not partnering with God. If you're a cat salesman or something like that. Hendricks continues, our work is not something that we do apart from God as the secular world would view it. It is not something beneath God's concern as some Christians might view it. Oh, if you're in ministry, that's really important. That's partnership with, if you're working at Chick-fil-A, that's not as big. No. Your work has intrinsic value. Through work, we serve people, we meet our own needs, we meet our family's needs, we earn money to give others, and through work, we love God. Do you realize that's God's first commandment? Do you ever think about that? I believe it's the first commandment in the Bible in Genesis 1:28. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over it. Theologians call this the cultural mandate, God's cultural mandate. Fill the earth, subdue it, rule. In other words, God says, I've created the world, I've created you, now you go create. Go to work, learn, study, organize societies, develop civilizations, invent tools, plow fields, build buildings, mine minerals, compose music, create art, explore scientists, play ball, advance history. God's first mandate for us is to work the earth and advance it with him. And when you know your work is partnership with God, it changes everything. Colossians 3:20. Whatever you do, do it with all your heart as something for the Lord, not for people. I'm convinced that I decided to spend so much time in this because I think this is one of the great aches of this generation. Gen Z gets a lot of negative press these days because of their attitude toward work. You've seen the articles, 11 reasons Gen Z doesn't want to work anymore. Gen Z, war on work, progressive Hill staffers. You heard that one, right? Asking for a shorter work week. They don't want to work 32 hours in the week. And I would suggest to you, you can look and point your finger and say it's because they're lazy. It's not. It's because they don't know why they're here. There was a time when, everybody is born with this sense of I need to have purpose and I can't stand for my life not to have meaning. And for those of us who grew up in younger generations and older, in previous times, there was the sense of I'm going to go succeed. I'm going to go achieve. And so you get out of bed in the morning and think, this gives me a sense of purpose. I'm achieving something with my life. Well, the younger generation looks at that and says, that seems like folly to me. But nobody can live without purpose. So what do? They don't want to work, so they want to get the next dopamine fix, essentially. They may get it through entertainment, may get it through sports, they may get it through, gaming or gambling or porn. But underneath the drive, you can look at the behavior, but underneath is this drive. They know that the dopamine fix is going to leave them more depressed in the end, is not going to give them a sense of great purpose that's lasting, but at least for a while they feel like they're alive inside. And what they long for is to know why they're here, that they're made by God, they're made for God. Whatever you do it with your heart as something done for the Lord, not for people. There are at least 220 different occupations named in the Bible. Some worked with gold, some silver, some cut stones or constructed buildings, some were fishermen or teachers, or some mined, some forested, some were musicians, some were farmers. There were even a few preachers and priests among them. But every occupation was supposed to be seen as partnership with God. If you bifurcate and say, this is my job, this is my time, this is my income, this is my field, then it's going to be really hard at the harvest to say, this is partially God's. Generosity begins when you get up every morning and say, this is God's day. This is God's vocation. The beginning of generosity is Jesus Christ is Lord of all my time, of all my skills, of all my calling. Colossians 3:20, whatever you do, do it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for people.